Welcome back to the college football week 0 and week 1 way too early betting locks and predictions, and we will be breaking down every big game from the opening couple weeks of college football. So let's start out in Ireland with Florida State against Georgia Tech in a big ACC clash there. Georgia Tech, one of the harder schedules in the nation and one of the only ones outside of the Power 2 conferences of the Big Ten and SEC that is in the top 15, and this one is a tough one to start out, and I like Florida State currently. Florida State introducing DJ Uiagalelei this year to the squad, and I just think they're far more talented than Georgia Tech here. Despite a decent amount of roster turnover for Florida State, I like this spread up above 14 points. So I think if you're able to lay 12 and the hook with Florida State there, I would take it, as I think anything below 14 is a great number for that game. Then we've got in week 0 as well, SMU going to Nevada in a curious game in their first game as an ACC team. SMU, one of the top teams in terms of returning production. Nevada, lots of roster turnover, and that's not too bad of a thing because Nevada was atrocious last year. These spreads on a lot of these games, there is a bit of value because the spreads are a few points off. For example, if you wanted to bet SMU here, you could get minus 21 in the hook. But I like Nevada here, plus 23 and the hook, not even counting in much home field advantage. Maybe there's a point and a half. I don't expect much of a crowd here. The difference in the weather could play a factor. Certainly the elevation up there in Reno for Nevada. I like them to keep it within 23 and a half, but with these games that turn into blowouts, which I'm kind of expecting this to be, you're kind of rooting for a backdoor cover or holding your nose that Nevada keeps it a game for a while. SMU would just be shaking the rust off. But yeah, I like Nevada there, plus 23 in the hook. And then if this line ever goes to like SMU minus 20 and a half, and you can get that critical number of the 21, then I'd go back and play SMU. Keep in mind also, there's multiple weeks until the season. So essentially any wager you place now, you're going to have to make up not only the juice on the wager, but also some interest, because you're essentially giving the sportsbook interest-free loan for about a month or two. So you've got to factor that in when you're thinking about these numbers. But yeah, anything below 21, I'd play SMU. Anything 23 and a half or above, I would play Nevada in that game. And then a quick note on Boston College against Florida State. This spread is about 21-22. I don't like Florida State here, even though I do like them in week 1, and I think that the spread has a chance at extending more. I think a fair number would be about 19, so I would not advise parlaying both the week 0 and week 1 FSU spreads. It could have been a profitable play if the week 2 spread was a little bit more favorable, anything under that 21 critical number, but I would just stick with the week 0 play. And, if anything, it's a money line on the week 1, but I think it's minus 1,800. So they're not really giving you much help there. I would just stick with the week 0 spread there. Then we've got North Carolina against Minnesota in the second leg of a home and home that was played at North Carolina last year. Again, the spread is sitting right about Minnesota minus 1.5 or 2. I like Minnesota to win the game. I don't love that number. I think it's a fair number. If this comes back down to about a pick'em, then I would come back and play Minnesota. Not interested in backing North Carolina. Who knows what the weather will be here. I expect a charged home environment. I think the number is pretty fair. I expect a Minnesota win in that one. Then we've got TCU and Stanford, and this is another area where you can get a lot of different numbers. Stanford, number 2 in returning production, but doesn't really matter if the production was horrible. I don't really know, but if you need some more confidence to pull the trigger on Stanford here, because this is an absolute hold your nose spot. TCU didn't have the best season last year, but they returned more quality production for sure. Not really sure why Stanford scheduled this home game, when the majority of the students aren't even going to be there. I don't expect any sort of home crowd presence, but essentially this number, not factoring any home crowd, should be about 9, and then any crowd noise or crowd favoring Stanford is icing on the cake. Maybe there's a point there. So I do like the value for Stanford, but again, if this was ever to turn back to TCU minus 7, I would take TCU in that spot. But yeah, we'll take Stanford, and it's an absolute hold the nose spot. Hopefully they can keep it close, as happens for Stanford at home, especially in a 7:30 p.m. local kick there. Then we've got the big game, Penn State at West Virginia, and this could be the top home environment of week 1. And I like West Virginia plus 11 in the hook here. Again, variety of numbers on this game. Anything below 10, I would play Penn State if you can find it. But at 11.5, I like West Virginia. I think they're going to keep this game close. And Penn State, of course, Drew Aller didn't look great in the spring game, to say the least. So I think it's going to take a while for that offense to settle in. Penn State does tend to take care of these inferior opponents in their out-of-conference, but they haven't been on the road in what is set to be an absolutely charged environment at West Virginia in a while, and they haven't really performed very well in their big games on the road either in Big Ten play. So for that reason, for all those reasons, I like West Virginia plus 11 in the hook at home there. Then we go to Atlanta, where this is a neutral site game, Clemson at Georgia. A lot of people are marveling at how large this spread is, but I like Georgia up anything below 14 here. And, I just think that Georgia is a much better football team than Clemson here, despite, of course, Clemson, not a ton of roster turnover for them, as always, and limited to no usage of the portal for them at all. Georgia should be the number 1 team in the nation going into this matchup, so tough spot for sure for Clemson, and Georgia usually does very well for themselves in these kickoff games in Atlanta. So for all those reasons, I like Georgia. I think the spread should be about 16 or 17. Don't shoot the messenger, but Clemson, I think that they will improve this year, but I think it'll be too much for Klubnik and Clemson to handle in game 1 here. Then we've got our second epic week 1 rivalry game, Miami at Florida, 3:30 local in the Swamp, and I like Florida plus 3, and in this game, I think the wrong team is favored. This is going to be an absolute bloodbath. I don't expect much scoring here, especially in these massive heat conditions. Florida has been very good in the Swamp in these week 1 spots. At home, add in the rivalry game, the fan environment. I like Florida to improve here, and if you look at that Florida schedule, this is an absolute must-win game. The Florida schedule is the toughest in the nation. I believe they play 5 of the top 9 teams in the nation, and 8 of the top 15 and 8 or 9 of the top 25 or something crazy like that, due in part because they're playing these out-of-conference games against Miami and Florida State, as they always do. But I like Florida State plus 3 here. I think that they will win this game in the Swamp, and I think the wrong team is favored in this one. I like the Gators to get it done against Cam Ward in a transitioning Miami offense, which will struggle on the road. Then we've got an interesting one that a lot of people probably won't have their radar on, but Wyoming against Arizona State. If you can get 7 or above, taking the points with Wyoming here, I like the spot. Arizona State should improve this year. Wyoming could have a little bit of a setback record-wise. They ran a little bit hot in terms of their luck in close games, but I like them to lose this one close here, if not win outright. But I don't expect much of a fan presence. This isn't a massive game for Arizona State, and even though the Sun Devils played better down the stretch of last season, and they do have some fight in these early season games, I think that Wyoming can get to them early. Wyoming, not the worst team on the road last year. Remember that they gave Texas some fits during their road game there, but I like Wyoming to keep it within the 7. I think a fair spread for this game is about 5, so we'll see where this one ends up moving, but a lot of people don't have their eyes on this. I like Wyoming if you can get in excess of 7 points there. Then we've got USC against LSU, and this is a pure number play. I know both of these teams should have, better defenses, and, it remains to be seen how much better either defense will be. You're expecting a shootout there. I think the over-under is 66 in the hook for points, but I like LSU minus 6 if you can get that number. I think a fair spread would be about 7 in the hook, and that's about where it opened here. A little bit of USC money coming in, or maybe this is just the sportsbooks reacting to the recent recruiting USC has been doing for that defensive side of the ball. I'm not really sure, but I like LSU minus 6 here, but it's a simply numbers play. If it closes at 8, I might come back and take the points with USC, but it seems like this is trending down, so you could even probably wait for the number and get a better number with LSU if you wait longer for it. But this should be a spectacular game. I could see LSU losing outright, but I also think that just the value, more times than not, they are going to cover this 6-point spread there, say, with a 7-point win. Then we've got our final big matchup, And the storyline of this one, Notre Dame at Texas A&M. Of course, Riley Leonard playing against his old coach, Mike Elko, in College Station. New coach taking the reins for the Aggies, and I think this is going to be possibly another one of the best environments that we will see in week one. Remember that this Notre Dame schedule is super soft. They play Florida State at home, this away game at Texas A&M, and then away at USC. Those are probably their only 3 ranked games if you're going to give Texas A&M a preseason top 25 ranking here. I like Texas A&M to win in what should be an absolute brawl. Just the maximum points that I can give to a team for home field I'm using on this matchup. This should be very hot. Notre Dame should not be used to the heat and humidity that you have down there in southern Texas. And I don't think anything can prepare them for this A&M crowd. Notre Dame hasn't been the best on the road. Remember, they played close with Duke last year. So Elko already has some experience with them there, and then also lost at Louisville. So this is a kind of revenge game for Mike Elko in a variety of ways. And I think this A&M crowd gets the best of Notre Dame. And I don't think Notre Dame will produce much on the offensive side of the ball. I think that Texas A&M defense can rally here, and Texas A&M can score a massive win in week one. So those are my predictions and betting locks for the week one games. Let me know if you guys have any predictions below and what you think of the games.